Chapter 26, Introduction to the Biosphere. Section 26.5, Adaptive Strategies for Survival. So now what I want to look at is how large-scale adaptations occur over many species in particular ecosystems. So what we have is ecosystems are determining the characteristics, the general characteristics of a species. For example, how are species in a desert environment or ecosystem different than species in a tropical rainforest? This whole idea that natural selection can take place at a more sort of general level within an entire ecosystem was first described in a 1967 book called The Theory of Island Biogeography by E.O. Wilson and Robert MacArthur. This work looked at the importance of disturbance in a habitat. Some habitats are more disturbed than others. Disturbance could be a temperature disturbance, a drought, storms, and while other ecosystems are more sort of undisturbed, these plants or animals just keep living happy lives without being stressed. So we have two extreme points in this idea, highly disturbed environments and environments that lack disturbance. So what MacArthur and Wilson noticed was that under frequent disturbance, the species develop the following general adaptations. And this is both for plants and animals. They develop a small body size, they have a short lifespan, and they grow and mature very quickly. The reproductive process in the life of these species is usually delayed to the end of the organism's life, and it's a last sort of hurrah. They end their life by creating a whole bunch of offspring that they then disperse into the environment. These offspring are generally very small and easily dispersed through the environment, either by wind or water or some mechanism that moves them about across the Earth's surface. And as I said, this is an end-of-life event, and these organisms tend to put a lot of effort and resources into the production of this reproductive event, in the production of offspring that are going to be dispersed. And an example of a highly disturbed environment are grasslands. So grasslands are disturbed by drought, by temperature changes, by grazing. And within these environments, we find that the species tend to be short-lived, small, and produce offspring that are easily dispersed through the environment. So we're talking about grasses and short-lived plants living in these environments. The term they invented to describe these organisms was that they were R-selected species, and it's related to an equation that they had that they were using at the time. In stable habitats, we get species with the following adaptations, and these are known as K-selected species. They have a large body size, long lifespan, slow maturation, so they grow slowly, and it takes a long time for them to get to the point where they can reproduce. And the reproductive effort isn't an end-of-life event. It occurs over many, many years. The offspring that are produced are relatively large. They have a lot of resources allocated to them for survival. And instead of most of the resources going to promote reproduction, like in our selected species, most of these organisms, these K-selected species, the resources go to promoting growth. An example of case-selected species are the large trees that you find in various types of forests. They produce large seeds, and these seeds contain a lot of resources for germination and survival. These large trees can exist because they're not being removed by disturbing events. Some of these trees even put a fruit around their seeds to better ensure that the seed will be taken to a new site for germination. Now, plant ecologist J.P. Grine expanded R&K selection and suggested that there was another factor that involved the evolution of particular adaptations for survivals. He suggested there wasn't just two major evolutionary strategies for plants, but there was three. And he called these extremes rudderals, competitors, and stress tolerators. So he added two new sort of vectors to what determines what adaptations evolve over time. So it's not just disturbance. He also included level of competition between individuals and level of stress. And of course, stress increases with the amount of disturbance in the environment. The less disturbance, results in less stress and higher competition between individuals. So let's look at the endpoints of this triangle. So R represents ruderal plants, C represents competitive plants, and S represents stress tolerators. The plants that are categorized as stress tolerators have a high level of stress in their environment and a low level of competition. So that's what determines the adaptations that they develop. In a ruderal environment, you have low stress but high level of disturbance. And then with competitive species, you have high competition and low level of disturbance. So what are some of the characteristics seen in these three different types of organism groups? So ruderal plant species dominate frequently disturbed habitats. They have a short or annual life or perennial life habit. They can exploit the rapidly changing character of frequently disturbed habitats by having easily dispersed seeds and fast growth rates. They allocate a large proportion of their biomass to seed production, and those seeds are waiting in the soil to germinate for the right conditions to occur, usually through disturbance, to provide them with the nutrients and the water and the light that they need to begin their growth. So a classic ruderal plant is the dandelion, and it easily exploits disturbed environments, grows quickly, and produces a large number of seeds at the end of its short life. In stable environments that lack frequent disturbance and where nutrient resources for growth are plentiful, competitive species are common. The general characteristics of competitive plants include high growth rate, the potential to produce a tall, dense leaf canopy, because one of the main resources they're competing for is light. So they need to produce a stem and leaves to gain this light. And at the same time, they need to exploit the nutrients that exist in the ground. So they have to have a large root surface area. So trees are a classic example of these competitive species, living in environments where there is low disturbance, and the high level of competition is for light and nutrient resources in the environment that they live in. The final category of adaptive strategies for plants are the stress tolerators. So here, growth is limited or constrained by shortage of either water, light, heat, or nutrients, or too much heat. as in the example of deserts. Deserts would have species that would be called stress tolerators. And stress tolerators tend to have specific morphological or physiological adaptations to survive the stress. So, for example, cactus have no leaves, and that's an adaptation to survive in these environments. If they had leaves, there'd be too much evaporation from those surfaces, and the plants would lose too much water and wouldn't be able to survive. Cactus also have thorns. Those are another adaptation to stop animals from trying to bite into their swollen stems and consume the water that's contained in their flesh. The cactuses are slow-growing species because there's not a lot of nutrients available, because the environment is dry, water is not very plentiful, so the nutrients can't get into the water supply that easily and be taken up by the roots to support growth.